Is there apostolic succession in the Florians? A. The following is a text taken from the circulating brochure, Spiritual Awakenings. Spiritual Awakenings on the apostolic succession of the so-called Florians. Part 1. Part 1 presents the texts mentioned below. A. The confirmation of Papas. B. The official response of the Russians of the diaspora. C. Ionesco's letter to the Russian Synod of the diaspora, to which he belonged. After the death of Florinites, 1955, who left no successors, proving once again that he was not aware that those who followed the patriarchs after the introduction of innovation into the Greek world constitute the remaining orthodox remnant, namely the preserved, true Church of Greece. His followers, not wanting to be humiliated by returning to the body of the Church from which they had voluntarily cut themselves off, despite the exhortations of the Holy Synod, scoured the entire world in search of the person who would be suitable for them and who would ensure for them the necessary apostolic succession and hierarchy. For 5 years, 1955-1960, they were without a leader. Then, in 1960, they went to the USA and rushed to the Russian Synod of the diaspora, seeking ordination. The Synod gave them a negative answer, and they, seeing that their plans were unexpectedly failing, secretly convinced one of the members of the Synod to illegally perform the ordination in secret and without any interference, despite the Synod's refusal and without its opinion. Thus, on 09/12/1960, they achieved their desire and joyfully returned to Greece. However, the Holy Synod, upon their return, learning of the events of the ordination abroad and not knowing precisely and in detail what had been done, openly denounced the events to the Orthodox flock and demanded from the person who appeared as a bishop the appearance of an Orthodox ordination certificate, proving whether he had indeed received the hierarchical apostolic succession, and from whom, so that the rumors would cease, the divisions and divisions would cease, peace would be established, and, first of all, some kind of reconciliation would be invented. Then the Holy Synod would act appropriately so that we would be led to unity, if of course there was the necessary Orthodox confession ecclesiology and the benevolent disposition on the part of his followers. Deceased Kavuridu. Unfortunately, the Holy Synodals labored in vain at that time, because no answer was given except for vague vagueness. No ordination came to light at that time except only after the passage of several years, and after, of course, after the actions of the Orthodox, it had been completely illuminated and clarified what exactly had happened. Here comes to the mind of everyone who wishes not only to boast that they are orthodox, but also to be true in practice, the question of why those who were called upon then remained silent and did not give the eloquent answer that would even thunder their bold accusers and irrefutably prove their innocence. What did they have to gain by their silence? From the facts and the documents presented that will parade before us in the sequel, everyone will understand what the bitter truth and the harsh reality are, unfortunately. Who is scheming? And who, with sophistry tricks, secretly continues to keep a large part of those who follow the fatherland outside the church, outside the salvation longed for by all? A. The Confirmation. Seraphim, Archbishop of Chicago and Detroit, 2141 W. Pierce Avenue, Chicago 22, Illinois, USA, number Proteo, 677, September 23, October 6. Confirmation. I hereby certify that I, together with another canonical bishop of our own Russian church abroad, have actually proceeded to ordain His Eminence, Archimandrite Akakios, as Bishop of Talantium. The ordination took place on December 22, 1960, in the city of Detroit and within the boundaries of my diocese, and should be considered legitimate, even if it was carried out without informing our own Archdiocesan Synod. In witness whereof our signature and the provincial seal have been affixed. Seraphim, signature, Archbishop of Chicago and Detroit. As is clearly evident from the above document, the ordination certificate does not state the year it was written and is signed by only one of the ordained, and not by two, as it states. And not even the ordination certificate can be considered anything more than a simple confirmation, as if it were a confirmation of a vicar to a needy person. Here is their conclusion. For the hierarchy is a public office and requires a regular ordination certificate and complete transparency and publicity. Since then, 1960, and until today, they have never published in their official document that they have acquired a bishop. In fact, the Synod of the Russians in the diaspora, in its official document, denies that any of them proceeded to the ordination of the Pope. The document below is the official response of the Synod of Russians of the diaspora to Greek clergy, followers of Papas who, by their letter dated 15/09 of 1961, addressed the said Synod requesting information about the ordination, if it took place, and by whom it was performed. Imagine then how much information they had among themselves and what transparency there was about the ordination. Also, regarding the issue of what orthodoxy the Russians hold, no mention is needed because the text really speaks for itself, very eloquently. B. The official response of the Russians of the diaspora, Synod of Bishops of the Russian Orthodox Church of the diaspora, to the ecclesiastical community of the Greek Church of True Orthodox Christians, W. 3. 51,296, September 27, 1961. Dear Fathers, we have received your letter of September 15, 1961, and have reported its contents to His Beatitude Metropolitan Anastasios, as well as to His Eminence Archbishops Seraphim and Vitalios. Therefore, I am able to give you the following answers to your questions. 1. Archbishop Seraphim told me that he never wrote to Far Akakios any letter with the content you mention. Once, in response to a letter of his, he wrote to him only that he could not help him in any way. 2. No order of our synod was ever issued regarding the ordination of Far Akakios. On the contrary, his request for ordination was rejected by the synod. 3. Their eminences, Archbishops Seraphim and Vitali, stated once again that they did not ordain Father Akakios and therefore could not grant him a certificate of ordination. 4. My son, Far Antonio Scrab, is not a bishop but only a monk, and did not recommend Far Akakios to any bishop for ordination. In fact, if he wanted to act in this way, it would be nothing more than his own opinion. 5. Our church has never declared the Ecumenical Patriarchate or the Greek Archdiocese of North and South America as schismatic and has not severed spiritual communication. 6. Our church maintains the old calendar and sees the introduction of the new calendar as a great mistake. However, its policy has always been to maintain spiritual relations with Orthodox churches who have accepted the new calendar as long as they celebrate Easter in accordance with the decision of the First Ecumenical Council. All yours in Christ. Archpriest George Grabe, Chief Secretary of the Synod of Bishops, Notification 1. Ecumenical Patriarchate 2. His Beatitude Iakovos, Greek, Archbishop of North and South America. The above document, therefore, clearly testifies to the origin of the Apostolic succession which they received from the Russians in the diaspora, who officially declared that they never declared the local churches of the heretical Patriarchate of Constantinople and the also ecumenical Greek Archdiocese of North and South America to be schismatic, as well as that they never severed their spiritual relations with them. Furthermore, from the aforementioned confirmation on page 2, we have established that another canonical member of the Russian Synod was present at the ordination of the Pope. But who was he, and why is he not mentioned in the text? From official documents, it is established that he was a Romanian new calendarist and also a member of the same Russian Synod. A wretched synod composed of new calendarists and old calendarists, who not only did not sign the said certification, but later, by his letter to the Synod, publicly denies any participation in the ordination of the Pope. But let us look at the specific part of his letter that interests us. C. Ionesco's letter to the Russian Congress to which he belonged. Of the diaspora in America, Western Hemisphere, Romanian Orthodox Mission of the Bishop of Canada, to His Excellency and Beatitude, Metropolitan Florinite, President of the Holy and Sacred Synod of the Orthodox Bishops of the Church beyond the borders. Your Beatitude, the text of the Greek religious magazine Ecclesiastical Struggle, issue 51, October 1970, among other things, contains inaccuracies. They accuse me of having taken part in the ordination of the bishop of the old calendar named Akakios Papas. This is utterly false, not only because I did not participate with the Russian Bishop of Chicago in such an ordination, but also because I am only now learning of this news. The assurance that what they attribute to me as having done scandalized many souls in Greece obliges me to be clear, explicit, and categorical in my episcopal assurance that the ordination as Bishop of Akakios Papas is completely unknown to me and is foreign to me, and, consequently, there is no reason for me to scandalize Greek Orthodox Christians. Bishop Dr. Theophilos Ionesco. It should be noted that this section is from the first page of his letter, where he apologetically denies that he took part in the ordination in question, and acknowledges and admits that in one of his services he commemorated Florinite and Pope of Rome Paul VI, and the ecumenical pseudo-patriarch Athenagoras, Spiros, and also participated in co-prayer with papists and uniates. Here then is who the Pope was ordained from and how the so-called Florians acquired apostolic succession. Then they mock the Orthodox and present, constantly repeating it, their well-known excuse, namely, ordination by one, as the reason for not returning to the bosom of the Church. has the time come for them to understand that they too appear to have received ordination from one, and to cease using this argument, which is also unorthodox because, in essence, whether they understand it or not, they are making fun of themselves and mocking themselves. Let the wise man understand, and let each one now take responsibility for his choices. Is there apostolic succession in the Florians? B. The following is a text taken from the circulating brochure, Spiritual Awakenings. Spiritual Awakenings on the Apostolic Succession of the so-called Florians, Part 2. It includes a pamphlet entitled The Declaration of the Pro-Orthodox Brotherhood, The Great Fire, which was published in 1961, just a few months after the illegal ordinations that were performed in the company of the Archbishop of Chile and Peru Leontios, who was invited from South America. Declaration, Pro-Orthodox Brotherhood, The Great Fire, Stop After Fear, the coup against the holy struggle of the GOC. Crimes in our holy struggle. Our attention has not escaped the criticality of the situation to which our Holy See has recently fallen, on the occasion of the ordination of new bishops to govern it by the Russian bishop Leontios Filipovich, formerly of Zhytomyr and Berdichev in Russia, as he himself stated, and now bearing the title of Archbishop of the Russians of Chile and Peru. It is also known that this critical situation began to emerge from the presence here of Bishop Leontios, when he was authoritarian and without any competence or authorization, completely arbitrarily, entrusted with the settlement of the highest issues of our holy war in the absence of those concerned. This one, despite all the relevant divine and sacred canons, and despite all moral order, divine and human, completely ignoring the legitimate representatives of our organization, but also all those capable of having a valid opinion, proceeded, as it is said, ceremonially to ordain at the will or at the suggestion of those who entrusted him with the money of our holy struggle, one or two persons without the knowledge of this, Treasurer Archimandrite Mr. Mercurios Kaloskamis, and the General Secretary Archimandrite Mr. Panteleimonos Tsalupis. The consequence of this inappropriate tactic was that the unrest caused would pass thanks to the self-denial and self-sacrifice of the real fighters for orthodoxy. Indeed, these selfless fighters, ignoring the insult that had come upon each of them, and even all the other irregularities and exposed attacks that had occurred, were led by the likeness of cats to rely on the assurances given about the orthodoxy of Leontius's views. In addition to other struggles, they imposed on themselves the sacrifice of enduring the results of these exposed actions for the sake of preserving the unity of our holy struggle. But behold, with the passage of time, and according to the information gathered from time to time, the trumpeted orthodoxy of Leontius's views proved to be a fleeting epic. As a result, the unity of our sacred struggle fell into a new acute crisis, which rekindled and once again dangerously threatens to erupt like a volcano and cover with its lava what remained standing. Those who wholeheartedly fight the good fight of faith, the fight to preserve the ancestral traditions, are willing to undergo any personal sacrifice. They are willing to overlook any curable anomaly, but not to be indifferent to actions that overturn the foundation on which the edifice of our holy struggle is based, and through which holy orthodoxy is abandoned and betrayed. Orthodoxness in danger. Indeed, the danger to orthodoxy and our holy struggle is greatest from the shocking information, which exploded like an atomic bomb in the Orthodox world, that Bishop Leontius is not only not sincere and genuine, as he claimed, but on the contrary is a Latino and a close collaborator and supporter of the Latins. His relations with the Latins exceed, in practice, the aspirations of even the most daring Unionists. Our fathers, in order to preserve orthodoxy untainted, forbade and stigmatized the apostasy with the Latins, as well as all other heretics, with severe penalties. They did this because throughout all ages the treachery of the Latins towards the Orthodox has been demonstrated beyond description. Thousands are the martyrs who were sacrificed on the altar of orthodoxy. Most of them fell victims to papal intrigue, and they fell because they refused to cooperate or communicate with the Westerners, who as heretics were excluded from the church. But behold, an Orthodox cleric, a bishop, was found who, disrespectful to the provisions of the divine and holy canons and to the sacred traditions of our church, sanctified by so many sacrifices, and to the detriment of the victims of the apostate papacy, conspired and prayed with cardinals in Caracas, Venezuela. 1. This bishop is the Russian Leontius. This is not an unfounded and unproven accusation, but a fully proven one which, moreover, Bishop Leontius himself confessed. This act is confirmed by eyewitnesses and was also immortalized by the photographic lens. Proof of this is the photograph posted on the second page, 3, which is quite characteristic and indicative of Leontios' views. The beloved Voice of Orthodoxy, in its issue number 398, dated August 15, 1962, page 7, attempts to refute the fact. Unfortunately, however, it was refuted by Leontios himself, who tries to justify himself, claiming that he did this out of courtesy towards the Latins, who are good people. He adds that his chief Anastasios and Seraphim and his other colleagues, the hierarchs, do the same. 2. With these things in mind, there can be no doubt that the orthodoxy of our holy struggle has been put in danger. The situation is therefore serious and requires great attention and wisdom, because the line of the GOC up to now has been a line of strict precision. A look into the past will convince us of this. So in the past, in 1924, some pious clergy and laity, not tolerating any deviation from the strict orthodox line, reacted against the calendar reform. This reaction was formed into a powerful movement of piety and created a regime. The leaders of this movement, the venerable hieromonks, proclaimed absolute rigor and scholastic exactitude. This rigor and exactitude were erected into walls of separation and became signs of division between the followers of this movement and the rest of our compatriots. Here are some forms of this rigor and exactitude. A. All the new calendarists are schismatics. B. Entry into a new calendar church was prohibited not only during service, but also during the celebration of other sacraments, such as marriage, baptism, or even during the funeral ceremony. C. Children of old calendarists were not allowed as students to follow their teachers and classmates to school services. D. Marriage between new calendarists and old calendarists was prohibited. In the event of such a marriage, the parents were not allowed to attend the wedding. E. The sponsor at the baptism had to be an old calendarist. G. On Mount Athos, old calendarist hieromonks and monks commemorating the ecumenical patriarch were considered profane. G. Whenever a service was to be held in an outside church, a consecration was performed in it beforehand, for fear that it might have been desecrated by a service by new calendarists. The sign of the Holy Cross outside a church operating according to the new calendar was prohibited. I. New calendarists joining the ranks of the parishioners were enumerated. J. Visiting someone celebrating according to the new calendar was prohibited. The above positions were proclaimed with fanaticism and written with stubbornness. And its deletion. And yet this past was ignored and written off. By whom? By those precisely who founded it. By those who, moreover, fanatically supported the principle of absolute expansion by the new calendarists. And it was not only ignored but also written off. Declare that it is a sin and a crime to communicate with the new calendarists. Panic and storm in Greek society and family. Hatred between relatives, coldness between spouses, rebellions of children against their parents, forced celibacy of young women so that newborn girls would not be married, fanaticism, extremism, the blessed memory of hierarchs Chrysostomus, Bishop of Florina, Germanos of the Cyclades, and, until recently, Germanos of Demetrias, were characterized as traitors, mocked and reviled because they advocated sobriety, moderation, and common sense. So these pillars of excessive exactitude, these preachers of unapproachable rigor, those who dared to anathema the new calendarists and demand confessions of faith, they have indulged in and tolerate a practice infinitely more serious than communication with the new calendarists. And what is the practice? Action under fog. We need high priests. The whole of Greece is a country of undefined people, and those who do not follow the new calendar commit a crime by communicating with new calendarists. There are no genuine ones in Greece. Where will we look for them? In America. Strange whispers, suspicious movements, fog and darkness. This is the climate under which the solution was given. A saint from heaven temporarily resides in Athens. A confessor hierarch has longed to visit the hell of the uncircumcised. From God, a Messiah and Redeemer. And who is this? Leontios, Archbishop of Peru and Chile. So obvious was his holiness that those who took the initiative of his recall from America did not even dare to check his status. Applying the believe and do not search principle, they surrounded the stranger with the glory of a celestial being. So Leontius, along with the elder Talantius, Akakios, ordained in an arbitrary manner, far from the opinion of the flock and its representatives, under the dense darkness of the night, a multitude of exactors and preachers of excessive severity. At these ordinations, no one, except for the ordaining and the ordained, was present. Not even the first-ranking priests or the chanters. The first shot against orthodoxy, the mystical ordinations completely foreign to the liturgical practice of the Orthodox Church. Where is the pronouncement of the bishopric in which one is ordained? Where is the ratification of the ordination by the flock through the pronouncement worthy? Where is the tradition and the formulas of orthodoxy? Fog covered everything, artificial and deliberate fog. Fog facilitating the seizure and distribution of offices and the imposition of a regime of irresponsibility and arbitrariness. The excuse was also heard. We feared the reaction of our persecutors. But the excuse was a lie because, as is well known, that we are favored by the ruling political formation, and we would be able, as not being closely monitored, to act with coherence and caution, as would be appropriate. However, regardless of this, upon arriving in Greece, Leontius communicated with many responsible and irresponsible persons in Athens and other cities of Greece. He even promised, before proceeding with the ordinations, to listen to the opinions of everyone. And yet, in the end, he ignored everyone. He despised everyone, not obviously of his own free will, but at the behest of those who directed him and were interested exclusively and only in satisfying the passion of philarchy. So, where was the marked risk? There was a risk that the suitors, the candidates, would lose the much-desired Penelope, the despotic Mithra. So intense was the fear of this danger, in fact, that a zealous higher monk, having been elevated to the rank of bishop through this dark and twisted conspiracy, confided before his ordination that he would suffer a diabetic coma in the event of failure, and such was the hostility of the candidates that even this friendship was betrayed. As the main protagonist of the Leontios' conversion, the then protosyngellus, Mr. Chrysostomos Chiusis, was not ordained. Not only was he not ordained, but he did not even take part in any ordination, because even from him on, the ordinations were kept secret. Fog not only before the ordinations, but also after them, and until today, 4 months after the ordinations, not even the slightest announcement about such an important event has been made by the columns of the official organ of the struggle, Voice of Orthodoxy. What is happening? Fear or shame? Thus, under a deadly and anxious fog, the chicks of nocturnal and death-devouring vultures were released, which are already tragically croaking on the ruins of the fallen Zion, the revenge of the fog. But the fog took its revenge, the darkness revealed, and the night stripped. Within a short time, the terrified Greek public was informed that the one who had been summoned from America, as a bearer of unadulterated authenticity, to collaborate with the preachers of the accuracy of the past, had the power to communicate not with neo-calendarists, but with Latin clergymen during a ceremony and in a Latin church in Venezuela. This act of his, which had as its effect the raising of justified noise and the formation of a mental state of absolute distrust towards Leontius and those who collaborated with him, was proven and confessed by him himself. This act is condemned by the divine and sacred canons, and penalties and sanctions are imposed against those who commit it. As a culprit of such an act, Leontius became subject to trial and potentially deposed, although he had already been deposed by his mother, the Russian Church, which follows the old calendar. Consequently, he could not perform any act, even if she did not have a condemnatory decision against him. Those who dare to express a contrary opinion, and to underestimate the prejudicial assessment of the offender's responsibility, accepting the validity of his sacred acts, overturn and undermine the entire struggle of the old calendarists since 1924. We ask such people, then why did the old calendarists break off their relations with the church they were maintaining in Greece before the synodal judgment, since all the churches following the old calendar are in communication with it? If they recognize in Leontius its right, even after the violation of the mentioned canons, to perform sacred rites, then the old calendarists wrongly broke off their relations with the church they were maintaining. If they insist on claiming that the old calendarists acted well, then they cannot recognize in Leontius the validity of his actions after his communication with the Latins, which was condemned by the canons, and which communication, according to Leontius's confession in his letter, constitutes a regime of modesty for him and his collaborators. A logic consistent with the past of the struggle of the old calendarists imposes the condemnation of Leontius, and therefore puts under serious test the authority and regularity of the ordinations being performed. Here, then, is the revenge of the fog and the reward of its creators. The fog covers the sun and the conspiratorial secrecy, the truth and the right. And this simony is not excluded, because only things that are controlled by the light are made manifest. But the things that are done in secret, it is shameful to speak of. What should be done? We do not wish to raise party slogans, nor to strengthen the groups of various exploiters of popular piety. Simply, with courage and enthusiasm, we declare that we continue the line of consensus on the calendar, which was laid down by our late spiritual leader, Bishop Chrysostom of Florina. Let each one take responsibility for his actions alone. The dilemma that arises, tragic but also inexorable, is: Either we are still mistaken and deceived, refusing all communication with the new calendarists and stubbornly remaining far from the official church, or the enterprise of Leontius, after his proven communication with the Latins, must be condemned as a crime against orthodoxy. The schism of the calendar has not yet been condemned, but the papacy and communication with it have been condemned. There is no room for compromise, nor for circumstantial faith. Black is black and white is white. So then, because you are lukewarm and neither hot nor cold, I will spew you out of my mouth. Reverend 3:16. We stand therefore well. We stand with fear, because we are in danger of becoming mocked and ridiculed before men, but also guilty before the holy God. 1. Against these acts, the sanctions of most of the divine and sacred canons, apostolic and synodal, of which we quote some here to characterize the magnitude of the sacrilege committed. As you can see, the 65th Apostolic Decree imposes a double penalty. 45th Apostolic Decree. A bishop or presbyter or deacon who has joined heretics shall be excommunicated, but if he has permitted them to act as clergy, he shall be deposed. 65th Apostolic Decree. If a clergyman or a layman enters a synagogue of Jews or heretics, let him pray and be deposed and excommunicated. 29th Apostolic Decree. If a bishop or a presbyter or a deacon becomes a slave for money of this value, let him be deposed, and let him be ordained, and let him be cut off from all communion, as Simon the Magus was by me, Peter. The second of the Fourth Holy Ecumenical Council in Chalcedon. If a bishop ordains for money, and in practice he derives the unearned grace, and ordains a bishop for money, and the one being ordained does not benefit from the commercial ordination or promotion, but rather from the other's value or from the care he has succeeded in addition to money. 2. The excuse that Bishop Leontios simply attended out of modesty because he was invited is not valid. Leontios was invited as a cleric. As a cleric he attended, and as a cleric in the Latin Church. He certainly would not have sung, but would have prayed for him, for the one who was invited. And precisely for this reason it was necessary to reject the invitation. Then why should we condemn other higher clergy, the ecumenical patriarch, the metropolitan of Thessaloniki, and others, because they have consorted with heretics in various places? Yet, no other Orthodox clergy in America, Greek or Russian, or of any other ethnicity, of those holding an official or even unofficial capacity, except for Leontios and Katsounakis, attended the funeral in question. 3. The following is the well-known photograph, which shows the concordant prayer in the Latin Church with the cardinals, and below the following text. In the light of events, the above photograph was taken on October 4th, 1959, inside the Latin Cathedral of the Venezuelan capital Caracas, when the funeral service was being sung for prominent Catholic bishops who had been killed in a car accident. The victims were the Latin Archbishop of Venezuela, Arias Blanco, the Bishop of Barcelona Pambaroni, and his secretary. This accident plunged all Catholics, and especially the Catholics of Venezuela, into mourning and sorrow. The sadness is also imprinted on the faces of those pictured above. Particularly characteristic is the sadness of the two archbishops, the Latin and the Orthodox Leontios, who, standing side by side and flanked by Catholic clergy, recite the funeral service with real sorrow. Alongside Leontios is his peer and fellow worker, the well-known married pseudo-bishop is of Venezuela, Nicolaus Katsounakis, but he is preoccupied with other things and is disturbed. He poses with complacency, interested in his own promotion. This act of Leontius then aroused the consciences of even the most indifferent Orthodox of America, and they sought the intervention of the Greek Archdiocese of America to take measures against the audacity. Among others, the highly respected, internationally renowned, and worldwide circulation Greek magazine Krikos, still published in London, which is published in 2 languages, Greek and English, also rose up and protested. The said magazine, denouncing this uncharacteristic act of Leontius from its columns, published on page 65 of its issue number as 107 of the year 1959, a relevant response with the above photograph. The exact text of the said response is quoted here. The parenthetical phrases are also those of The Ring, Venezuela, Caracas, October. The capital of Venezuela, Caracas, was plunged into mourning when on Saturday, October 4th, the funeral service with full honors was held at the metropolis for the current Prime Minister, Archbishop Arias Blanco, Bishop of Barcelona Pambaroni, and his secretary, who were tragic victims of a car accident. With all possible pomp and ceremony, the funeral service and burial of the 13th Bishop of Venezuela was organized within the premises of the metropolis. Venezuela mourned its young, 52 years old, archbishop and wanted him to be accorded the highest honors. The president of Venezuela, the Congress in body, the Senate in body, the diplomatic corps, the archbishop and 17 bishops of the clergy of Venezuela, the armed forces, the universities, all the best that the place had, were present at the burial of its beloved archbishop. Also honoring the place with their presence, these were their credentials, and this honorary position was given to them, two bishops of the Orthodox Church, the Russian Archbishop of Chile and Peru, Archbishop Leontios, who was passing through Caracas, and the Greek Archbishop of all Venezuela, residing in Caracas, Archbishop Nikolaos Katsounikis. Without any comment from my side. Our Archdiocese of New York has the floor. Alakos Zianektos. Note to self. The above is from a pamphlet circulated by a group of protesting Florinians shortly after the secret ordinations of the remaining elected at night and in darkness, on the basis of which the body of the so-called Florinians was elected. See, I beg those who denounce the events with pain and bitterness that they are from the Florinian side, and if, paradoxically, there are some who think differently, they are very much requested to show the corresponding evidence of their words, bringing them to the light of publicity. In fact, at that time, a schism was threatened among them due to the shocking revelations that had seen the light of publicity, and the situation was fearful and unstable. Finally, everything was buried, everything was forgotten. Well, as if all this were not enough, today we hear the people of Florina boasting in their magazines, claiming that they have a completely legitimate apostolic succession from the Synod of Russians in the diaspora. If the Florinians from the Russian diaspora have indeed received their ordinations, no one can argue against this. The issue that they themselves must investigate is another, and that is, what are the thoughts and what are the actions of the Russians? We say this because if someone claims to follow clergymen who have a canonical and valid Orthodox ordination, at the moment when A. One of the ordaining priests, the deposed Acacia Pope in America by Matthew of Bresthenes, if of course we believe the claims of the Florinites about his complicity in the ordination, that is, the Romanian Bishop of France Theophilos Ionescu, appears to have officiated with the new calendar, appears to have had churches within his episcopal jurisdiction that followed and celebrated according to the new calendar, and he also prayed with new calendarites, communed with them and served them mystically, and had even mentioned, according to his own statements, in a liturgy where he performed both the Pope of Rome, Paul VI, and the Patriarch of Constantinople, Athenagoras, Spyros. While towards the end of his life he was deposed because he fled the jurisdiction of the Russians of the diaspora in America in a hurry to unite with the new calendarists of Romania. B. The one who collaborated with the deposed Akakian Papan in 1962 in Greece in the ordinations of Parthenios Skoulis as Bishop of the Cyclades, Auxentios Pastras as Bishop of Gardiki, and Chrysostomos Neslimis as Bishop of Magnesia. That is the Archbishop of Chile and Peru Leontios. Filipovich is presented as a married father of 3 children who attended the funeral of a Latin archbishop in Caracas, Venezuela, in 1959, approximately 3 years before the previously mentioned ordinations of the Florinians in Greece, agreeing to the invitation of the Latins and even taking with him part of the Orthodox flock of the place, while he also prayed with some Latin cardinals who were present as was natural at the funeral. C. The Synod of the Russians of the diaspora is presented as having as its regular members people who follow and observe the new calendar. Theophilus of France and Jacob of The Hague, Holland, while its members are presented as having relations and joint prayers with the Latins. In fact, even the president of the Synod, Anastasius, Seraphim Ivanov, who ordained Akakios Pope, and others. Then, we say, he who thinks and says these things certainly ignores much of the hierarchical law of the Church and her orthodox teaching, and is suffering from a dangerous disease in the logical part of his soul. Now, passing this post and not resting only on the brief disclosure of the aforementioned individual cases, but wanting at the same time to give as a soul-saving antidote to that reader who, as a tireless student of the saving truth, seeks with good will and desire to learn the true thoughts and actions of the Russians in the diaspora of America, a broader knowledge, we say that there is a book that on its cover is inscribed Vigla of Orthodoxias, Hieromonk Joasaph, St. Mount, and there the one who desires will discover all that interests him. Also, let the researcher study what is written in the link below. egosh.org. Is there apostolic succession in the Florians? 3. Untitled, and the text speaks for itself. The Holy Chrism. You may perhaps remember that the Patriarchate of Constantinople during the Patriarchate of Bartholomew opened its doors for the preparation of the Holy Chrism, and the television viewers, at least those who watched, had the opportunity to enjoy the entire process of its preparation. As is known for the burning of the oil and the aromatic substances, many old icons that were no longer in use were burned, as they were considered necessary for this holy purpose. The Patriarch, surrounded by his hierarchy, was the chief maker of the divine mixture, which is preserved in enormous containers in the storerooms of the Patriarchate of Constantinople for distribution to the churches that request the Holy Chrism, as mentioned above. As you know, its sending or granting is done only to Orthodox Christians. We too, as genuine Orthodox Christians, take care to procure this divine preparation, and we make great efforts for its acquisition. Athanasios of Achani and Nea Ionia. Article by the Florinite bishop. Athanasios of Acharni and Nea Ionia in the periodical Voice of Orthodoxy, issue number 860, February-March 1994, p. 19, concerning the fact that his synod obtained Myron from the new calendarist Patriarchate of Constantinople. The photograph was found on the internet, and it would be good to alert those well-intentioned people from Florina who are somewhat interested in matters of faith to research page 19 of the above issue under number 860 for the months of February-March 1994 of the magazine Voice of Orthodoxy, and thus see for themselves if indeed the above apocalyptic article is included in it. We must admit that we do not know if this news is actually true, as the issue in question is absent from our library, and to be honest, we are still researching the subject. However, from our side, what we have to say to all the Florinian readers of this blog is the following. Dear friends, let it be borne in mind that in 1994, according to which the article of the aforementioned Florinian seems to have been written, the from Chalcedon Bartholomew Arcantonis, the new Vecos and terrible persecutor of some Athanite believers today, the syncretist of an incredible degree, the violator of the holy canons and a fierce Latinist, had ascended to the ecumenical throne of the now spiritually extinct Fanar. This, whom most Florian people today blast with fiery articles in their magazines, but based on the above confessions, they are said to be anointed with holy, you mean impure, myrrh prepared by the hands of this same ecumenist.